And then hour by hour by hour, everything in the hospital was changing, and it was all fear, right? Nurses didn't know what was happening. There's different rules for my husband, different rules for visitors. And so what I imagined right from the get-go to be what it would be like to be a mother was radically changed. And we came home, and my husband and I made the decision throughout the pandemic to err more on the side of caution, which I'm learning a lot about now as I step into the present. And so we didn't have anyone come to our home and hold our baby for the first 2 months of her life. Like we just didn't know what the right thing to do was as parents. And as a 26-year-old, I never imagined I'd be making those decisions like so early on in my daughter's life. And so that was hard. I get even emotional thinking about it now. But it wasn't just that, it was the reality of, and don't say it again. As I'm in the hospital, I'm getting text messages from my kids. School's shutting down. What's going on? Are you in? Can I come see you?
These are youth group kids.
These are my youth group kids. Oh, I don't have other children. But Ken likes to remind me that I could have turned my phone off.
There's power button on these things.
I know. I didn't reply to them. Actually, your nephew was one of them, being like, how are things going? Did you have your baby? I was like, yes to the baby. That was it. But all that to say is, before me, all of these kids I've been journeying with for the last 5 years are like, school's canceled, what's going to be next? I'm so disappointed. What will grad do? And they're throwing all these questions out to me where I'm being like, I don't have any answers. Like, I don't know what to tell you. And so that was hard navigating with youth. And actually, like, Kent, you're a dad of two teenagers too. Like, can you share with me first, Kent, like, what was your experience in your household with these kids who were texting me?
At that time, I wasn't in ministry. I was working a different location for a brief period. So when the pandemic started, I wasn't dealing with the ministry realities. But I did have 2 kids at home at that time. And for my daughter, she's quite a bit quieter, and so she handled it a little bit differently as things were being taken away. She was in grade 11 at the time. There was extreme disappointment, and there was some loneliness that came as a result of this, obviously, I think for a lot of people. But her social circle was kind of stripped away, in that she'd been given one of the lead roles in the school musical at that time, and that was kind of starting to become the group that would be her, sort of natural place of relating to people. And so there was effects of that even after the initial lockdowns, because those relationships weren't fully established at that point. And so, but for the most part, like she's kind of did all right. My son, on the other hand, is not quiet. Is the life of as many parties as he can go to. And for him to all of a sudden have everything taken away, sports and school, he doesn't like school, but he likes people at school, and then being forced to kind of just be at home, and we're working and he's on screen like for hours at a time with no outlet, no physical outlet. We actually watched him get kind of blue. Like it was scary. Like, and in addition to that, we didn't have the normal mechanisms by which we would normally help out our kids, like in times of loneliness, or you couldn't have people over. You couldn't say, hey, invite some people over, we'll have a bonfire or whatever. At that time, we couldn't. We'll go play sports, and it actually, as with everybody, it impacted family. Like you couldn't have your family over, and you couldn't go to church and see people. Like it was really isolating and difficult as parents to go, okay, we've got these kids that are kind of floundering. What do we do? So it was a tough time. Absolutely. That whole season is one that I hope to not repeat.
Hopefully not, ever.
Yeah. Maybe by the next time they'll be old enough they can live on that.
Sure.
Or they'll have their own kids to navigate it with, right?
Exactly. So, anyway, Shawn, you two have had that experience both from your kids and from a professional perspective as well. So please share.
Same kind of thing. I remember where we were when we had a family get together that was extended family. So my wife is local from Edmonton, and her parents live here, and then she has 2 brothers who are married and each have 2 kids. So we're all together for a get together. This was on that March a Sunday in March, right in the middle of the month. And I remember it being like 4:37, and we get the word that school is going to be closed. They're going to close down school for 2 weeks.
It was March 15th.
March, that sounds right. Yep. That sounds right. And you would know, that's kind of a special day.
It's kind of a big deal. Yeah.
And so we thought, Well, this sounds prudent. They're going to close for a couple of weeks. We've got spring break coming up. By then, this will be sorted out. Not a big deal. And what we found was that this was not sorted out by April 1st.
No Easter. I literally was like, it's fine. We'll have family over for Easter. They can meet the baby then.
Yeah. Oh, so optimistic. It just progressed, and every week was like some kind of a new thing. And I remember there being a big thing about, we hit 10 people in Alberta. And little did we know, 10's not so bad. It just kept on kind of snowballing, and we would see this in different places where there are outbreaks. So a lot of fear around, we just didn't know what we were dealing with. There was worry in our house in terms of just financially. My wife and I both do most of our work. Hers is all, and mine is mostly for schools. And so if there's no school, then do we have jobs? How does that work?
Yeah.
And that was a big financial concern for us at that time. With my daughters, same kind of thing. My oldest is a bit more extroverted, and she had probably a little bit of a tougher time with it than my youngest. At the same time, my oldest was in a gap year, and so she was working a job that she very much did not enjoy. And so being laid off-ish from that job, that wasn't a terrible thing for her. She didn't mind that part of it. Didn't like the isolation, but didn't mind being isolated from that job. That was okay. My youngest is more of an introverted kid, and one that could engage with her has a small, close set of friends, and could still, communicate with them, text with them, and be able to get her need for human contact met in that way. While also being able to do schooling and largely being old enough that she could manage it on her own. So we were blessed in terms of their ability to be able to manage this in a different way than certainly parents of a baby or of a 5-year-old or a 9-year-old would be able to do that. So it was scary for us, and I had to kind of put myself in two spots of being a psychologist and supporting folks that needed me, while also having my own fears around what exactly is going to happen.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for sharing. Thanks to both of you for sharing your experiences. It's good for us to hear, and I hope it's been encouraging for all of you. And now is the moment where we are actually going to put you into breakout rooms in a moment here, where you can discuss these very questions and share with one another what March 15th through to June, July-ish was like in your home. And as Ken kind of shared, did you feel prepared to navigate the mental health of your kids and yourself? Because that's very important as well. Fun fact you may not know is when I came back from maternity leave, I got to jump into kids ministry for a season, which was such a gift to me. And then Kent joined, which was an even greater gift to me. And so Kent and I have had the pleasure of having a lot of conversations around what we're seeing in ministry. I'm newer to ministry, you are not, but we're seeing things differently now in our families and in our kids. And so Kent, before I share and you expand, what are you seeing in kids ministry? What have we talked about seeing in kids ministry?
Yeah, it's an interesting time, and something that we're really kind of working through and wrestling with. In the midst of everything in our past that's kind of come through, and in the uncertainty of the present, there's fear, there's things that are causing anxiety. And one of the ways that I'm seeing this play out specifically in the area of kids is we have a number of kids like Kennedy who they only know pandemic, and they only know seeing people with their faces covered. And even kids in kindergarten grade 1 have missed, possibly for the whole time they've been aware they're alive, have been sheltered and really sheltered, not allowed to leave home, and this sort of overarching fear just sort of that is pervading the culture. And so what we're seeing is that because they didn't engage in maybe swimming lessons early and didn't go to preschool, or their first time in school was online, which has got to be weird for a kindergarten kid. That now they're having to engage the world at a sort of scary time, but they're a little behind socially, because of this. And so we're trying to figure out how do we how do we help parents and help our own kids kind of deal with this and deal with the anxiety and kind of catch up a little bit on that whole side of things, because there's so many different reactions in this time. Like one of the great concerns for me is I've heard a little bit that parents are actually saying, we're just going to put all the spiritual stuff on hold till this is over. And part of me goes, man, I understand the fear of not wanting to engage in this, and I understand that kind of thing, but what's actually going to get you through this ultimately is going to be Jesus, and you're going to need him, and knowing him longer is better. And so, maybe Kiara, you can jump on this from the youth side of things, but and how maybe some of this sheltering has responded. But I'd like it if you could, on this side of things, and then Kiara's side of things as well, talk a little bit about how do we help our kids kind of catch up, and how do we help them be resilient in this stage of uncertainty that we're in, because we don't know when it's going to be over. We're kind of used to how it is, but what's next? But Kiara, maybe talk a little bit about from your.
Well, what I was going to say is I have more actually young adult volunteers, to be honest. I have more 18 to 22-year-olds who have social anxiety. And I know it's in the youth, they just don't have the context or the language for it yet. But I have volunteers, I have 3 volunteers have panic attacks on our launch night, because they're I haven't been in a setting like this yet. I don't know, I literally had them in a turret distance away from the kids. I'm okay, what are we all feeling? Let's breathe together, let's do this, because they hadn't been in a large setting, and they're we're just overwhelmed by the energy in the room. Something that used to give them life is now sucking the life out of them, and they're we just can't handle the type of agenda and pace that we used to live before. And like I said, my dear 19-month-old has yet to successfully stay in nursery yet here at church, even though we try. It's just the screaming, and it's I'm trying to let her be resilient, but her brain can't comprehend that yet. So I need to be resilient, but I can't handle it, so I'm gonna go get her. And so it's just this right? There's just so much social angst. And I see a lot of people, when it's over, I'll step up and do this. When it's over, I'll go see a therapist. Until then, I'm just gonna now's the time to go get help, actually. I don't want you having a panic attack in the turret at youth. I want you working through this so you can thrive in this new environment. And so as Kent was saying, talk to us about this, how can we help our kids with resiliency? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, a bunch of things in there. For our kids that are younger, so much of their lives, so for 2 of us, about 3% of our lives has been in the pandemic. For Kiara, it's a bit more, but for our kids, it's most of their memories, or for our kindergartners, grade 1s, this is what they think school is.
Yes.
And it's school's actually better than this. Trust, you'll have to trust us on this, because they have no idea that you can do all these things. You can play with people that aren't at recess, that aren't in your class. It's awesome. Good stuff's coming, it's just not here yet. At the same time, our kids have been able to cope with this a lot better than expected. I was in a kindergarten classroom just last week, and every child in there, so it was actually 2, it was in the morning and then an afternoon, and in both of them, every child was wearing a mask reliably without any real difficulty. And for us to, a year and a half ago, if I said, you can get kindergartners to wear masks and they'll be fine with it, you would have thought that was insane. And it turns out that they just kind of acclimate to it and they get used to it. But what they've missed out on is so much in the way of social engagement. Part of what you get out of school, a lot of what you get out of school, is soft skills. So you learn how to manage when someone invades your personal space, or you're at recess with someone with the grade 6er that turns out to be mean. You learn how to manage these kinds of things, and a lot of these things that are in some ways negative, they're not fun for our kids, but they don't have the chance yet to navigate those or figure out how to solve them yet. And you combine that with the loss of social learning that happens with kids at this age, because a lot of what you get when we're having an interaction is that you're picking up on nonverbals. So as I'm looking at you, you're giving me eye contact, you're nodding appropriately, and what that tells me is either she's interested in what I'm saying or she's pretending to be interested in what I'm saying, and both are socially appropriate. Hopefully it's number 1, but number 2, that's okay. So when you get a lot of this information non-verbally, and when all that they're getting is this part of the face, I'm not communicating everything through my eyes. As hard as I try, I don't get it all out. And I'm not able to read the other person very well either. I can get away with that as an old person, but when you're in that stage of learning about it, it's really tough because they're missing out on that stuff. And there's going to be a lot of catch up that happens there.
I find everyone looks really surprised in masks when they're trying to smile at you.
We're really trying to.
You're smizing.
Exactly. Yeah.
That social anxiety too is if we go back to the before times, 2019, we knew that for our teenagers in particular, social anxiety was really escalating a lot of theories around that. My suspicion is it has a lot to do with this, but that's probably a different conversation that we can have. But kids were not they didn't seem to be picking up on social cues as well as they would like, as well as we would like for them to. We now had in previous years, if you go back 10, 15 years ago, if you're in a new school or you're in a situation where you don't know anyone and it's lunchtime, you kind of had to stand there or figure out a way to summon your courage and go talk to someone. Now you can very socially appropriately do this and look down, and no one is going to engage with you because you're looking down. And maybe my phone it's actually not even on. It doesn't even matter if it's on. It just looks like I have a socially appropriate way of getting away with that. It's sort of like, oh yeah, I have a girlfriend in Niagara Falls, so I don't have to worry about that. And so it doesn't give our kids that chance to learn how to engage with people, because if you're shy and you don't like doing that, now you don't have to. So now you take them out for a year and a half where we've had masks, we've had some kind of a covering, and you also had cover for if you didn't want to go out on Friday night. Before, there might have been some shame associated with that, and now it turns out, the premier says we shouldn't go out, so I'm free and clear. And we've seen just real worries with our kids as they re-engage in school. A number of our kids that went online, not most of them, but a significant minority, they really kind of liked it. And that's of concern, because then they're not getting those social opportunities that they need to have to be able to get into the real world and do these interactions with people where they mostly go well and sometimes go sideways.
So just to jump on that a
Yeah,
little
please
bit.
do.
As parents, how do we help, and how have we hindered that, both in the past and in the present, where you talked before there was increasing anxiety. Did I do that? Did I contribute to that?
And as parents, the answer is probably probably a little bit. There's a generational difference in how we parent now than what we did a generation ago. So as we were preparing for this, we were talking about like what we did when we were kids. So as a child, I remember being 7 and I would bike all around the neighborhood all by myself. And I didn't even know anyone that wore a bike helmet. And this was, I won't say that that's great, but what you did get with that is I got the opportunity to learn how to manage being on my own, to know if someone was kind of creepy, I would go around, a different way to get to my friend's house. So you pick up on these things. And now leaving your 7-year-old out to go in the neighborhood by themselves without a helmet would be just a half step from calling children's services. Yeah. That's a real difference. And so what we've had happen over the last generation is this desire for us to want to protect and bubble wrap our kids. I remember being bullied as a teenager, and I sure didn't want that to happen to my kids. So I want to make sure that they don't have to experience any of that negative stuff. So we have this idea of that helicopter parenting, where we're going to just, check on them, make sure everything's okay. And if something goes wrong, we're going to swoop in and fix it. Or worse yet, you have the snowplow parenting, which is I'm going to pave the way for them so they don't have to experience any negative things that go on. I remember a situation in grade 5 where we were doing parent-teacher interviews or celebration of learning, and get to see where my daughter was sitting. And this is my outgoing child. So just so you know who this is. You baptized her, by the way.
I did.
Sidebar.
Yes, I did.
Anyway, that's not part of this presentation. But anyway, she was saying, "Oh, I sit here," and then Johnny sits right in front of me. Johnny's name is changed to protect the guilty here. And she said, Johnny was walking past me one day, and I had my foot out a little bit, and he tripped over it. And he said, "You tried to trip me." And I said, "No, I didn't." He said, "Yes, you did. I want to fight." And so my father eyes get real big, and I'm like, well, you know, and I'm thinking what I'm going to do to Johnny, and then I'm thinking, oh, I'm a grown man, I can't actually do that to Johnny, but I can talk to his parents, and well, anyway. So I said, well, what did you do? And she said, oh, I just said, yeah, meet me out by the swing set at recess, and I'll see you there. So my eyes got a little wider, and I'm like, well, what did he do? And she said, oh, he didn't show up. I knew he wasn't going to show up. He was full of it. And so if I knew about this situation, I would have been calling the teacher in between the time that this happened in recess, urgently trying to solve this problem. And my daughter solved it perfectly without any assistance from me. And so it's a reminder about our kids are more resilient and they're more skilled than we often think that they are. But the only way that you gain these skills is by having the opportunity to use them and to experience some stuff that doesn't go perfectly. One of the big things that's important for our kids is this idea of non-catastrophic failure. We want for our kids to be able to experience something that is, to experience things that don't go right, but they're not going to be terrible for them. And so as parents, I need for my kid to be able to not do well on a test that she didn't study for, because that's kind of what'll happen. It shouldn't be me trying to solve her problem for her. She needs to experience some of that, but we want to do it in a way that is, so allowing some failure, but the non-catastrophic part is important too. So it's not good parenting to say, I'm just gonna let her play in the street, and if she gets hit by a car, she'll learn her lesson. Yeah, she will, but that's not great for lots of reasons. So this is where things like, wearing a bike helmet, you do need to do that. And we want to give them chances where they experience things that don't go perfectly, but that are not catastrophic. Because what we know is that when our kids are truly bubble wrapped all the way up until they go off for, they get an apartment or they go to university, that then their ability to deal with adversity it hasn't been refined at all. So they don't have any of those skills. And this leads to just a real bump up in anxiety. We talked about resiliency as well, and I kind of got us off track.
Yeah, that's okay.
Off track there.
That's okay. I can slide back to the definition of it.
Sure.
Yeah,
I looked in the corner of my eye and I saw something like, oh, I went the wrong direction.
You're doing good. We got this.
So resiliency is, I Googled the definition. So the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or toughness. And to me, it's living through something that stinks and growing from it. The only way that you're able to develop resiliency is by experiencing these things that don't go well. If my life is perfect, then I'm not going to be able to develop this. An example of this would be if we think about child actors. Child actors are the happiest people on earth, right? Because they get everything they want at a young age. Everyone is adoring of them. They have all this money and everything turns out awesome for them, right?
Yeah,
and
that's why child stars go sideways, and I see on my Instagram thing, where are they now? And they show child stars.
Tends to not be great. And so when we get everything that we want, this turns out to not actually be the recipe for happiness, even though it seems like it would be. And so we want to be careful as parents that we are allowing our kids to experience failure. And this doesn't mean, by the way, that we want to be extra strict or harsh with them or to make them endure failure. The world's going to take care of that for us. It's more that when these situations come up, we work with them about how do you manage this next time. Maybe they say the teacher was unfair, and maybe the teacher was unfair. That's entirely possible, but you're probably going to have a boss that's unfair. You're going to deal with a friendship with someone that's not going to treat you in the right way. So being able to manage that and learn how to manage it when you're in a safe spot. It's easier to do it when you're 14 than when you're 24.
Yes, 100%.
Certainly what we've had during the pandemic, we'll go into this a bit more after the breakout room, but it's this opportunity to develop resiliency, and no one really signs up for a year of resiliency training. There's no workshops for this. I don't think it would sell out.
No, I don't think so either.
Because the only way you get this is that you have to, okay, I'm going to make something really kind of bad happen to you, and then I'm going to help you through it. That's not possible.
So kind of a blessing in disguise for all this. What you're saying is we're learning a little bit about resilience, without knowing we were doing it.
Well, it's thrust upon us.
Which is good, because it's like I said, we hope that there isn't more pandemics, but there are storms of life that we will have to deal with as it goes on. So it's actually encouraging to learn that, maybe I haven't done this perfectly, but in spite of my bad parenting, my kids are being more resilient.
The good news is that we make so many mistakes as parents, on a daily basis, and that our kids can generally turn out well, even though we make these mistakes. Prayer helps with that.
And therapy. What?
Therapy can help too, but prayer probably helps.
Yeah.
If you only pick one, pick prayer.
I wanted to say, like, let's pray now, because you said, like, it'll be okay. And okay, good night. But anyway.
No, I was just gonna say, like, hearing you say this honestly makes me laugh, because someone asked, what are you talking about? And I was like, oh, building resiliency. They're like, how would you summarize it? And I was like, our kids and us as parents are more resilient because we went through a pandemic, period. Like, truly, like, how do we build resiliency? Affirm the fact that we already have been. Affirm the fact that our kids and we are more resilient than we ever imagined. Like, there's truly moments where I'm like, good job, 2020 Kiara. Like, you got through this. You figured out how to parent a child in a pandemic. You supported other people through it.
And you didn't have a book for that. That book
I literally, I bought, what was it? It was a book by someone.
I
did read that, but it was useless in terms of the pandemic. But no, there was a book about the pandemic. I was like, maybe this will tell me something. There is books now for new moms and pandemics,
sure,
for the record, because it's been
late.
long enough. But it's just like, there was no guide for that. But even right at the beginning of the youth year, we thought, let's acknowledge the elephant in the room for our kids of, like, this year sucked. Like, can we say sucked? We can say sucked. We decided that, right? So. And like, so we truly sat down with them, and Pastor Jamie, the junior high youth pastor, and I were like, okay, what questions are our kids asking? If God's good, why would he let this happen? Like, truly, kids were like, if God is so good, why did I have to do this? Why did I struggle with anxiety? Why did I lose my friends? Why did I not get to go to university on the sports team I wanted because I missed out on my grade 12 year? Like, the whys were personal, and they were like really deep wounds in their story. And so one of the first sermons we actually did at the very beginning of the year is that very thing, like, if God is so good, why do bad things happen? And what was encouraging was we gave students the opportunity to reflect on where they were in 2020 and share, like, where they've seen God at work. And we drew on scripture from the book of Romans of, like, God works all things for the good of those who love him. And so, like, hey, this really hurt. This really sucked. Where have you seen God move? And we got to see kids, like, share stories of, like, well, I lost my friends, but I found my true friends. And, like, I learned a lot about the fact that I am introverted, and it's okay for me to thrive sitting at home painting, which I surprised myself. I'm a bit of an extroverted introvert. Like, you just learn new things about yourself, and that was okay. And something that we spent a lot of time talking about was out of Romans 5, where it's just like, you can rejoice when you face problems and trials, for they help you develop endurance. And endurance develops strength of character, and character strengthens our confident hope of salvation. And so for me, it's like, if I hadn't faced the problems and trials of the pandemic, I wouldn't have the level of endurance I do, or the strength that I have, or the character I have. And I think the same is for our kids, right? Like, and us as parents. Like, I truly think that because of what we've gone through, we have become more resilient, which is encouraging. And things have shifted a bit for us. Like, the present reality of life looks different for everyone. And I'm rambling for a second, but what's been interesting for me as a youth pastor is talking to parents and, like, the different ways that they're re-engaging with life now, right? And, like, what it looks like for some kids. Like, some families, when I call and check in on them, I'm like, hey, we haven't seen your kids at youth, or like, where are you at? And it's kind of one of three answers. Our kids are only engaging in one activity, and it's not youth. Lower the risk, be, intentional about that. Or it's, we're still doing nothing because we're still in a pandemic. Respect their opinion completely. Or it's that, like, what was the other one? I lost my spot. They're not coming. They're engaging in, or youth is the only thing they're going to, and that's why you're seeing them every week, right? And so it's just all these varied levels of filling their schedules. And I have kids who are the sports kids. They're like, I liked 2020 when I couldn't go to sports. I liked when I just got to slow down a bit, and now life is too busy. And, like, everyone's just re-engaging in this 2021 now reality a little bit differently. And, like, Ken, before we throw that question to the parents, which I'll let you start thinking about now, is like, how has your family specifically been building your life in this season? And, like, I'd love to hear from you, even before we split, like, how have your kids changed and grown? Because, like, I can't speak to Kennedy besides she walks and talks now, which is kind of neat. But, like, I'm a stronger parent. I'm way more decisive in my decisions thanks to the pandemic. And so it's not to minimize the hurt of it, but just to maximize God's power and his goodness in it.
Yeah, we are seeing, so Macy's graduated and gone, so we see her less. And Caleb, he's around more, but they've actually come out the other side pretty good. The one thing that you kind of alluded to, though, in this whole thing, in the busyness of it all, is, and I've talked with other people about this, like, when everything was stripped away, you weren't busy anymore.
I threw out my calendar. I literally took my 2020
Yeah.
schedule and threw it in the garbage because
Right.
I was like, I have no need for this now.
And
Park
there
dates
was,
for me.
there was a time in it where we were like, this is nice. Similar to what your kids were saying.
Yeah.
But now we're finding, as things do open up and things, we're trying to be a little bit more mindful of like, what do we allow back in this schedule? Because if we don't be somewhat intentional in it, it's just going to fill up.
Yeah.
That's what we did
That's the
before.
default.
Guilty.
Right? Like, it's like, we like to be busy, so let's just be super busy. And so we are trying to think through that a little bit
Mhm.
more, how we do that so that it's a healthy thing and that we can maintain like spiritual health and all of that.
If one donut's good, then 7 would be awesome.
That's how I usually do it. The dirty dozen. Let's see if we get 12. Just kidding. So I think that's kind of a little bit of the present reality to prepare for the future that we're trying to build in.
Yeah, Shawn, I know I alluded to wanting to hear from you, but on our time, I want to give them 15 minutes
Sure.
and then we're going to jump into the real practical application of like, what do we do for the future?
Can I throw in one thing, just as you had the
Always.
Romans quote up there?
Yes.
Well, I was looking for the quote where Jesus said, "Believe in me and you will experience no trials."
Yeah, I don't think that
Like, all
one's in there.
pastors,
Did you
can you
learn
help
that
me
in
with
Bible
that?
college?
That's a different religion.
That is
Oh.
not us. No.
Not us.
And so
That's
we
such a good
experience
point.
these trials. God doesn't take them from us. The problem of pain is, again, we could spend
Pain is a great refiner.
we could talk a lot about that in another workshop, but we know that exists, and we've had this specific trial that's been a global, worldwide thing. The most of the trials that we experience are more personal, and this is one that everyone had to some degree.
We want to get real practical on, okay, where do we go from here? I appreciate so much with what you've shared so far, Shawn, and actually encouraged on the fact that, we have been building some resiliency, and you know what, it's somewhat like, well, in many ways, God's bigger than all of this, and He's taken us through, and lots of ways, it's going to be okay. We've got some things that we can do, but it's going to be okay. Now, at the same time, I think as we keep going with this, we do want to be prepared for what life has for us, and we do want to coach our kids well in how to, grow in this at whatever developmental stage that they're in. I'm wondering a little bit in me too, that is the question of how do I make sure that I'm ready for the future? And what would I do to make sure that I don't undo the things I learned this year? Like, I'm wondering if part of it is, I had a really hard year. And yes, I built a lot of resiliency in that time.
Woo-hoo.
And now they've rung the bell, like best decade ever, not just the summer. And now we can go to a place where it's like, I can just relax, right? Like, and I can shelter it. Like, is it possible that I could undo what I've done? And how do I not undo it? And what do we do to sort of future-proof our kids in growing in resiliency and staying away from anxiety?
And a lot of that is, I think, just an awareness of what we've experienced during this year. That this year really sucked. This was a very difficult year for all of us in a lot of ways. And there's this gap between surviving and thriving that I think is important. That we want to, every year we have this sense of we want the future to be up and to the right, and we want it to be better. And 2020 and 2021 really has not been that for most of us. This idea of, I sort of feel like we've tread water in a lot of ways. And I think our family has been lucky that there are people, some of you have experienced significant loss, whether it's a passing of someone in your family, someone that you love. A lot of financial stress has gone on. There have been real serious losses that have occurred. And just being aware of that and having the sense of that if I'm not doing well, there's a reason for that, and that's okay. We are not called to be, Jesus doesn't call all of us to be happy all of the time. There's several Bible verses that turn out to not be Bible verses. And we know that in life we have ups and downs that go on. This has been a down year. And the idea of thriving later on is, I think that's something that we want to look forward to. But we think about how can we pick up on some of the things that we missed out on over the last year and a half. So that may be planning a funeral that's a proper celebration of life that you weren't able to do when we were in lockdown mode. We don't have to be perfect. And then I think that relates as well to with our kids. We don't need to expect perfection out of them either, as we are thinking about how we take care of ourselves and manage this year. That's been a pretty tough year. This idea of modeling self-care for our kids is really important. As parents, I remember, when this really hits home, the first time you take a flight with your baby, with your child, and they say, and if the oxygen mask comes down, put on your own mask first and then put your child's on. And you're like, yeah, that's not going to happen. I've never been on a plane with
Really? I
oxygen.
100%.
Are you kidding?
Sorry, kids.
You expect me to put my mask on myself while I'm holding my 2-year-old? That baby's getting masked. Actually, I should follow the rules of the land because the Lord puts them in place. Anyway.
I assumed that would take care.
Yeah, hello, Mom. Shane would be like, what are you waiting for? Just kidding, sorry.
So we want to model this self-care for our kids, and this doesn't mean showing them every emotion that we're experiencing, but it means showing them emotions in an age-appropriate way. Daddy gets to feel sad sometimes. That's all right. We can be disappointed in how things have gone because it's been a disappointing year. Showing them how we manage situations and what we've done to get through them is okay. And it's also okay to say, how I handled that when I got mad at you earlier, I didn't handle that well, and I apologize for that. It's all right to walk stuff back. A big piece for me over the last year and a half, about 3 months into this, I realized that stuff wasn't being done well. I wasn't super thrilled with how governments were handling things. I was certainly unhappy about the pandemic. There were a lot of things that I didn't like. And I also didn't like that, I'd go to the store and I couldn't buy toilet paper. Like, people are not doing their jobs well. Yeah. And I remember making this conscious decision this is going to be a year where I'm going to just show grace. Because I'm also, by the way, kind of languishing and not feeling super motivated to do things. I'm going to really work on showing grace to other people and showing grace to myself, because I'm really not operating at 100%. And this was something that's really helped me out over the last year. It turns out there are Bible verses about grace. This is a good thing. So
there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
It's a theme.
Jesus liked this.
Jesus is a pretty gracious guy.
Yeah. So, and what I know as a psychologist, this is just something that's fascinating to me. I say this in just about every workshop I get to do here, is that the idea of grace and forgiveness 2,000 years ago, this was bizarre. This doesn't seem like something that's a path to happiness at all. 30 years ago, this sounded bizarre. And what we've seen in secular psychological research is that when we forgive people, we're the ones that benefit the most. It's almost like, how did Jesus know this from 2,000 years ago? How was he a better psychologist? How did he know more about human nature and human psyche than everyone else did at that time?
Must be God, I guess.
Or really lucky. I think you've hit on it. He had this brilliance and this understanding of how we work. To me, that's one of the greatest testimonies or evidence of the reality of Jesus and who he is. That he knew this, and we couldn't find this out scientifically until almost 2,000 years after he said it. It's fascinating. Anyway, that's a whole other workshop. So, but this grace idea of you're going to, as a parent, make mistakes. Our kids are more resilient than you think. If you think about the mistakes that your parents made, and I know y'all all turned out pretty well okay. So you can get past that. You can manage these things, and there are things that our parents mess up a lot, and there's ways that you can get help with that, whether it's through a professional and getting therapy, or if it's just kind of working it through on your own, talking with friends, meeting with other people that have the same kind of things. So this self-care and this idea of what are you modeling for your kids? As we go back to anxiety, talking about how our kids will learn from us. When I'm looking really anxious or I'm trying to avoid a social activity, they're going to learn that that's the right thing to do. And so that's not good for me. My oldest was a bit of an adventuresome kid, and I didn't like big roller coasters. But there's no way in the world I'm letting my 8-year-old daughter go on a roller coaster without me doing it. So I'm gonna.
Had the same experience with my daughter. She's like 8 years old, like, Dad, you gonna come on this huge ride? And I'm like, if I don't, I got to give her my man card. So like,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, I guess we're going. I was terrified.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean,
And she's like, woo!
yeah. I was like, put your hands on it. Yeah.
You have to do these things that you sometimes don't really necessarily want to do, but we get that growth with our kids because they can push us out of our comfort zone. We want to make sure that we're taking those appropriate risks, those safe risks. So that's an odd kind of term, safe risk, but where maybe managed risk is better. And we're doing this now as we're managing our way through the pandemic. At the beginning of it, it's like, okay, I'm going to the grocery store. Here I go, and
It was that, yeah.
yeah, and I'm just all loaded up and, hoping I don't look at anybody that's going to breathe cooties on me. It's really a scary thing, and we have to figure out how do we manage that. And now we're 18 months through this and learning better how to manage it. And some of this just our own fatigue of, I'm just so tired of worrying about it. I'll just go and I hope I don't get it. So pray. And so how do we manage those things with our kids? But again, teach them that have taken some risks and doing things that you might fail is okay.
Mhm.
So that's an important piece. This idea of gratefulness, that as we get through this, focusing on the things that we have, and that there have been silver linings in the pandemic. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this and say that we don't have this big dark cloud. The dark cloud is there.
Absolutely.
But there's still some bits that we've learned from it. We've learned how to do presentations online. Everyone learned how to do Zoom in like 3 weeks. This is the kind of thing that would have taken years for people to sort out.
Yes.
And now, well, we seem to have figured out how to do that. Churches learned how to give services online
Oh
and
yeah.
nothing flat.
Yeah.
And it was seamless. Nothing went wrong.
I mean, I was on maternity leave,
As far
but
as I could tell.
from what I heard, it was a time.
But this idea of gratefulness is so crucial to instill in our kids, because we have to make a choice to be grateful. So my tendency is to complain and whine and gripe. This turns out to be a personal gift of mine. I'm really good at this. I have to intentionally not do that and think about the things that I have that I can be grateful for, because really that number of things that I have here, the number of people that treat me well, is so much bigger than the people who don't. And yet I spend a lot of time thinking about these people, and that's not great. That's not what we're supposed to do. It's not spiritual, and it also just doesn't make us happy. So if we show gratefulness, and you can do this in lots of ways, you can talk about it at the dinner table, you can do a gratitude journal, you can show it in interactions that you have with strangers. There's a lot of ways to be able to do this, but this is one of these things that from a spiritual and a psychological perspective, there's just no downside to it. There's nothing, no dangers to don't be too grateful. It's an easy one, and it's free.
I literally this year put a sign on my wall, like when I walk downstairs, the biggest print is starting today with a grateful heart. So the moment I walk downstairs and I grumble and there's still dishes in the sink, or I'm too tired for my day, I'm like, right, starting today with a grateful heart. What does that look like? And it's good to send a little prayer for Thanksgiving right when you start the day before you drink your coffee.
Absolutely.
And sometimes you smile through gritted teeth.
Yes, yeah, it's true. It's
I
very true.
have to try to do this.
Yes.
Because it's hard.
Yeah.
This idea of being more resilient than you think, and your kids are as well, that if we go back to March of 2020, and I appeared in the time capsule and said, you're going to be wearing a mask in October of not 20, but 21. And we don't know when that order is going to end. You would have thought, I can't manage that. And it turns out that we can manage more than we think that we can. So on the one hand, we have more resiliency than we think. On the other, we do have difficulty when the end time is vague and we don't know when it is. And that's something that I think we really struggled with in Alberta, because we were about to have the best summer ever. And I remember the best summer ever. It was like 3 weeks and it was awesome. And then best summer ever was called off. It was so nice to be able to think, man, I don't have to wear a mask inside anymore. We're at the endemic stage. This is just about over with. And we jumped the gun a little bit on that. And that made it so much harder. If we knew that we were going to have to hang on to the masks for longer, we wouldn't have liked it, but we could have managed it. But I think it's the endless nature of this, of when will this end? And it was even worse in the summer when we thought we had that freedom, and that freedom was yanked out. We had a harder time with it. The good news, though, again, is that you're managing this. You're resilient, and your kids are as well. And I've just got to say, from being I get to go to a lot of elementary schools and some junior highs and high schools as well, but mostly elementary. And your kids in there, they're really doing well. They manage the masks all right. They are able to engage in learning. They make attempts to talk with other kids. They're missing out on some stuff, and there's some real stuff there that we're going to need to catch up on in future years, but they're not miserable by and large. They're really managing that all right. So if you're just anxious about sending your kids to school, at least know that the people there, man, everyone is trying their best. They're doing their best. I'll just throw in as well, just make sure as you're showing grace, show grace to the teachers too, because it's a really, really hard job. And then finally, seek help when you need it. And this is I don't think we do this historically as a church super awesomely. I think there's this thought of if I have any kind of mental health challenge, that's a spiritual weakness. And we want to go to the master for help with mental health things. But at the same time, when I broke my leg, while I did pray about it, I also went to the hospital to get it dealt with. And so seeking out help when you need it. And there's a lot of ways this can happen. There are times when professional help is necessary. If there's a risk for self-harm, or you're catching yourself that your anger is hard to manage, then these are areas where I push more towards that professional support. But so much therapy and good support is done not by psychologists, but by family members, by pastors, by hairstylists. Lots of people do this and are able to do it well when you get that person with the right ear who has experience. So it's not a sign of weakness when you show a need. It's a sign of strength, because I have the courage to be able to take that risk. So, and as we do that, we model that for our kids and let them know that seeking help is a healthy thing to do.
Yeah, Pastor Greg, our lead pastor, says many times that he's never referred so many people to a counselor as he has in this past year in his entire pastoral ministry, because it's that point of like, I'm here to spiritually care for you, but there's more to unpack here, and so let's get you the help that you need, which I so appreciate, and I think it's incredible.
And it'll be a happy day when I am out of work because there's nothing for me to do. That's what I'm looking for, and I don't think I'm going to get there before retirement. I'm trying.
Can hope.
I can hope, but I
maybe before my retirement.
Maybe.
Well, on that note, we want to respect your time, but what I'm going to do actually is close in prayer. And those of you that have somewhere to go, whether it's picking up a junior high kid here at 9 or whatever it might be, we give you freedom to go, and then we'll tackle some of the questions that we've had come in after we pray. So let's do that. Before I pray, thank you so much, Dr. Reynolds. Thank you, Pastor Kent, for sharing your heart. And thank you, Kira, for all of us for sharing your heart and your story. And thank you for bringing your expertise. I've learned so much from you, from like our prep and our meetings, and hearing you talk here again, I learned new things. And so thank you for blessing us with the calling that God has placed on your heart.
I appreciate you guys, and appreciate you behind the computer, because you want to make sure you have proper props. That someone is making this happen, and it's not all us. So. Totally.
Yeah, okay,
thank you guys.
Now we've talked. Jesus, thank you so much for the opportunity to learn from one another, learn together, share stories, and just see where you have been at work in this past year. Jesus, thank you that we are becoming more resilient. Father, would that be an encouragement to us, whether it's resiliency that we can see now looking back, or whether it's resiliency that is to come as we're able to reflect. Jesus, we're thankful that you are always working all things for your good, for our good and for your good, Jesus, and we're thankful that you're good. So praise on your name. Amen.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Heather, do we have some questions come in?
We don't have any questions right now.
Okay.
We do have a comment.
Okay.
The comment is, we have all aged in this pandemic more than I think.
Amen.
Yeah. Were you bald before the pet? Just kidding.
Yes.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I don't get my interaction with the hairdresser very often as a result.
So you're missing out on your free therapy.
Yeah. So I don't know what I'll do.
That's fair. That's okay.
It doesn't look like there's any questions, but there is some thank yous coming in as well.
Oh, excellent. Well, thank you to all of you. We so appreciate it. Please know that all of us are available to you as you need. You definitely have my email from when you registered. So if you have any specific questions, please do not hesitate to fire them our way. This is not us saying, hey, we're available from 7:30 to 9 p.m. on this Wednesday only. No, we are here to resource you, equip you, have conversations. And if you are someone who is seeking help for you or your kids, we would love to get you connected and figure out what that would look like and support you in that. So, okay.
Right on.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Have a lovely evening.
Have a good night.